So let's discuss the United States Congress. Chapter 11 is entitled Balancing National Goals and Local Interests. So definitely when the United States Congress was conceived, that the goal was to give most of the power to this larger body, and these people were going to have the power to collect taxes and to make all laws which are necessary and proper, and to regulate commerce, all those things in Article 1, Section 8. The of the 7 articles of the Constitution, Article 1, the first one, addresses Congress, and definitely they were thinking that that was going to be the most powerful branch. So initially, everything was located in New York, and then the seat was moved to Philadelphia until they landed in their home, which is where they presently reside, or where the 3 branches of government do their work, and that is in Washington, D.C. D.C. stands for District of Columbia, and the design was that it would not be in any state, it would be in a district, and that is still the way that it is set up. That's where it is. At first, they certainly did not think that this was going to be a career for most members. They were serving, and they did other things. They came together, they did the work that was necessary in Congress, they passed laws, but this was not the only thing that they did. Today, it is looked at as a full-time job, and there are lots of perks that go along with it. The Congress meets year-round. They have lots of recesses. But they make a significant amount of money, which it's more than I've ever made in a year. They make $174,000 a year. Senators and members of the House of Representatives, the commissioners from the territories also make $174,000 a year. Then there is the president pro tempore of the Senate, and majority and minority leader of the Senate. They make $193,400 a year. Here I go with Wikipedia again, and I said that I didn't like it. And finally, the Speaker of the House makes $223,500 a year, and that is the only person that makes that amount. It's the only person that makes $223,500 a year. Note that the Vice President's salary is $230,700 a year. So the Vice President makes a little bit more than the Speaker of the House, and the Vice President gets a place to live. The Speaker of the House does not. But just hold that in your back pocket. But this is how much the people that we elect are making. And it is viewed as a full-time job. They set up offices and hire staff in Washington, D.C., and back in their districts at home. They try to spend plenty of time in their home districts so that they can meet with their constituents, find out what they want, and hopefully go back and do what their constituents want when they get back to Washington, D.C. So again, today, most members of Congress are professional politicians. There's not any that I know of that have other jobs. They zealously seek re-election because most of them are seeking to make it a career. There are no term limits. There are people that have been in Congress since the 80s. Nancy Pelosi is one of them. Um, Mitch McConnell is another one. And for the most part, incumbents, and that is an incumbent is just the person that had the office before that is running for the office again. Most people that already have the office get reelected. So let's talk about why it is so much easier for people that are already in office to get reelected. One of them is this concept, this notion that they get stuff for people in their state. And so they are elected by their states. They're not elected, and members of the House of Representatives are elected by just a district, some small cutout portion in their state. So they get lots of chances to do things for the people that live in their area. Now, if you're a member of the Senate, your constituency is the whole state. But if you're a member of the House of Representatives, it is some small portion of the state, unless you live in like Montana or Wyoming that only has one representative. Now, what has been very common over the years is that members of the House of Representatives and the Senate do favors for their constituents. They get funding for projects back in their districts, and so people associate. Man, we got all this money. Man, we got this built. Man, we got approval for this. Man, we got contracts with their member of the House of Representatives. Now, when you get federal funding for a project, a pet project, we call that pork barrel spending. I don't know why we call it pork barrel spending. I have read as many descriptions as you can imagine. So finally, after I read so many of them, I just picked one. So my favorite is that is back during slavery, the slave masters would have hogs slaughtered and put all the parts in a barrel, and they would let the slaves that were their favorites get at the front of the line and get the better parts of the hogs, the pork. So I don't know. I don't know where it came from. Apparently nobody does, but that one tickled me, so I said, okay, that's what it is. But I mean, you basically literally get some money, get some funding for a project. Probably one of my favorites was one in Alaska. If you have ever heard of the Bridge to Nowhere, there was approval for a bridge for a tiny island, tiny Alaskan island, that during the winter was, uh, I mean, you had to take ferries to get to the island. They didn't, and during the winter, the people were basically bound. There was nowhere for planes to land. There was no place for helicopters to land. It was very difficult for them to get off the island. So if somebody got really sick, then they were kind of stuck there. And so the Congress people from, I don't know if it was senators or members of the House of Representatives, got approval for a bridge to this little island. And when I say little, I'm saying it's about 300 people on the island. That would be federally funded. And so they get the approval, they start building the bridge, right? And then in 2005, we had Hurricane Katrina. And that certainly didn't affect Alaska. It affected Louisiana in a big way, and Mississippi and the Gulf Coast. Um, but as they started looking at the funding that was coming Louisiana and Mississippi's way, um, there were lots of questions about whether or not the federal government was being fair. And so reporting started looking at where funding was going, and a reporter discovered this bridge for 300 people that was being federally funded, and Alaska got really embarrassed. There's no other way to say it. They got really embarrassed. Congress got embarrassed that they had approved it, and so they removed the funding for the bridge in their next finance package, and so the bridge was halfway constructed. It was just in the air. And if you go and look at pictures, type in "bridge to nowhere," and you will see this bridge that's just kind of suspended, uh, because the funding was was removed before the project was finished. There's another advantage that incumbents have, and that is that it is much easier for them to raise money. A political action committee, or PAC, is an organization that donates money, that raises and donates money to specific candidates. And political action committees like to put their money with the more sure thing, and incumbents are looked at as better gambles. So political action committees have a tendency to donate their money and throw their support behind incumbents. So it's easier for them to raise money. Um, and they have done all of these favors, this pork barrel spending for their constituents. They also get an opportunity to um, do favors do literal favors, constituent service for their constituents. I did intern in 1992 after I graduated. Before I went to Baylor, I interned for my congressman, guy named Chet Edwards. Chet's not there anymore. In our next topic, I'll explain to you what happened to Chet. But my job was to take calls from constituents, and so I would sit there by the phone. I would answer the phone, and I would listen to messages, and I would just keep this log of who called in, what they called about, and my job was to look for patterns. So um I would find, a lot of people are calling about this this big pothole in Temple, and once I saw trends, if I picked up one, then they would let me go in and talk directly to Chet and tell him this is what we're seeing and this is what people are calling in about. It was really cool. They actually offered me a job, but they offered me a job in the Waco office. I wanted to stay in Washington D.C. and I was going to Waco anyway, so now I went ahead and went to law school. But the one I would sit there and I would watch, um, and I literally would hear the chief of staff or the person that was in charge. They would assign different issues to to members of the staff, and I literally saw, sir, can you tell me what your issue is? You're having a problem with VA benefits. You've been denied. I tell you what, why don't you give me a moment? I'll give you a call back. They would call over to the Veterans Administration. They would call somebody that they knew. They're like, "Hey, Bob, I got a case number for you," and so they would say, this person is telling me that they're being denied, and can you tell me what the problem is? And so they would look at it. They would look at their case, and they would, give them the lowdown. Then they would call the people back, and they'd be like, "Hi, Mr. Smith. Um, well, I have talked to the VA, and they told me that you need to fill out this form, and you need to put these words on it, and then you need to send it to this address. And I think that your issue should be cleared up." And so they would do those favors for their constituents. And I mean, there you have a vote. Those people are going to automatically vote for you because you're the person that helped me get my VA benefits. You're the person that helped me along the citizenship way. You helped me with my problems with the IRS. You helped me with getting an appointment to West Point. Just anything that they can do, that they can throw their weight behind, they definitely will do. The only reason that you haven't had help from your senator or your member of the House of Representatives is because you haven't asked. You call them in and you ask them for something that they have that's on the federal level, they will work to help you. As you can get security clearance in the military, and call your representative and tell them that you need some help, and see what happens. So really the most contested races, unless you, like right now, on October 18th, 2020, as we're getting ready for elections, the members of the some of those senators, some of Republican senators the incumbents are having some issues. And also, like in Alabama, Doug Jones, a Democratic senator, was elected in a special election, and it's Alabama. He's a Democrat. They are heavily Republican, and so he's probably going to have some trouble holding on to his seat. But Lindsey Graham is a Republican senator in South Carolina that is having some trouble. Republican Senator Cory Gardner in Colorado is having some issues. So sometimes when the elections are paired with presidential elections, then incumbents have some trouble. But for the most part, incumbents just glide right on through and get reelected. Another advantage that members of Congress have is that they can have some influence over state legislatures and what their districts look like. And it does matter. It matters who's in the district. It matters the trends of the people that are in your district. Who do they normally vote for? Do they know you? Are they more likely to go back and vote for you? Are they more likely to go back and vote for you? So the census is taken every 10 years. This is 2020, and they are wrapping up the census now. And so the census it is a job of the United States Census. They've now federalized it. It used to be they would let states count, and they very quickly decided that they were going to have to make that a federal function because states were probably puffing numbers. I don't know, but the census is taken every 10 years, and once they determine where people are, how many people are in each state, then it is time to allocate how many representatives each state gets. So initially the goal was you get, or the what was in the Constitution actually was 30,000. You got one representative for every 30,000 people in your state. If we were still doing that, the House of Representatives would probably be 1,100 people or so. Um, the House of Representatives is actually 435, and that has been capped since the 1930s, 40s, when they said, okay, we're just not going to have more than 435. So at that point, that means that they're just shifting the numbers for 435. Like California has 53 members of the House of Representatives. After the last census in 2010, Texas had 36. So Texas is second in the number of representatives that it has. And that means some states lose representatives. Since there's a limited number, some states lose representatives. So like Louisiana lost a representative, I want to say up in the Northeast, people are starting to migrate south and west. So a couple of those states in the Northeast lost representatives. Some states in the Midwest lost representatives. Texas got 4. So once you determine how many people there are, then you also have to draw districts. So they take the whole state, they carve it up. In Texas, that means that they are carving it up into 36 districts. They try to spread it around, and after some litigation, this is the deal. The districts have to have roughly the same population. And the districts have to be contiguous. They have to touch. When they redraw the districts, so divide the state up, when they redraw the districts, that is called redistricting. Deciding how many representatives each state gets, is called reapportionment. Deciding where the district lines are going to be is called redistricting. In the United States, redistricting and drawing the maps is the role of state legislatures. State legislatures. But if you think that the members of the United States House and the United States Senate don't get in there and get in those state legislators' ears, then you've got another thing coming. They certainly do. And there's a lot of politics involved in districting, in where districts go. So when you manipulate borders, manipulate districts to favor a particular candidate or give a disadvantage to a particular candidate or group, that is called gerrymandering. Now, why the heck do they call it gerrymandering? This is a map of Massachusetts, of Massachusetts. The governor of Massachusetts, I want to say 1800, was a guy named Elbridge Gerry. Elbridge, Gerry. Does that look familiar? So Elbridge Gerry was trying to get a political advantage for his party. And so he goes to the legislature and he's like, hey, y'all need to draw the map like this. So this is a district, is one district. And so they really picked and chose what counties were going to be in the district. It was a funny shape. People were confused about it. And a political cartoonist, and y'all know I love political cartoons. Political cartoonists gets this map and draws this head on it, and I don't know about the wings, but the feet. And he basically said that Jerry's map looks like a salamander. And so we have come to call manipulating maps to achieve a certain result, Jerry for Elbridge Jerry, mandering for the salamander. And that is stuck. I mean, it is in the dictionary. I'm teaching you the word. It's on the quiz. Gerrymandering is manipulating districts. Usually it's pretty easy to pick out gerrymandered districts because districts have a tendency to be pretty square. Just nice little squares, sometimes rectangles, but mostly they're a set of even squares. But when you start to see really odd, funny shapes, then you have some inkling that a district has been gerrymandered. I am going to show you a gerrymandered district. This is District 35 in Texas. So this is a United States congressional district. The congressperson that serves in District 35 is a guy named Lloyd Doggett. And it is, if you can see, Austin, but then it is part of Austin, down 35 basically to San Marcos. There's a little bitty sliver of New Braunfels and a little bit of San Antonio. Y'all, this is, basically 90 minutes from the northernmost part of the district to the southernmost part of the district. You could literally have a next door neighbor that is not in your district. This is a gerrymandered district. There's been a lot of litigation about it, and when we start talking about it in another chapter, we'll discuss why they did this and some of the methods that are used. But this is a district. Lloyd Doggett is a Democrat. Austin is heavily Democrat, and so is San Antonio. So basically, they wanted to split it up, and so they drew this district so that a Democrat was probably always going to win it, but they broke up the rest of Austin and put it with other areas that are more likely to be Republican strongholds. So this is the only Democratic district in the area. They basically packed Democrats into this oddly shaped district. Let me show you another one. This one is a little closer to home. So here is Fort Worth, Arlington, Dallas. And so this is District 33. Actually, Tarrant County College South Campus is in District 33. Somewhere here. Here's 20. It's 35, so somewhere in here. This is just take it in, soak it in for a second. Definitely not a square. So number one sign that it is probably gerrymandered. And so let's look at the areas that they did include and what was excluded. So basically we have the Highland Hills area. And so then a bit of South Fort Worth, because this is Odie Wyatt, and a little bit of Forest Hill. Everman is also in that area. They skipped downtown for the most part and go to North Fort Worth. north side. Um, and then they make this not interesting little sliver. Here's 20, here's 30. So this is north of 30, this interesting little sliver. They get over to Arlington and they cut out a lot of North Arlington. They have all of Central Arlington. So like by the stadium, by the I don't know, Globe Life Field, and I don't know what the Cowboy Stadium is called. Um and but not Mansfield area, not Southeast Arlington. It is a little bit of North Arlington, a lot of Central Arlington. Then there is Grand Prairie, Irving, West Dallas, and like Cockrell Hill is also in that district. This is a settlement. This is a settlement. Um, when Texas, when the Texas legislature found out that they got 4 new legislative districts, they drew all the districts so that it heavily favored Republicans. The problem with that was if you look at the demographics of Republicans, what they were doing was affecting minorities. And in 2010, the growth in Texas was, for the most part, because of a surge in um, Hispanic, especially Mexican descent, people of Mexican descent. Um, and the way that they had drawn their districts, they were splitting up areas that had high concentrations of people of Hispanic descent. And because redlining kind of works this way, they were also affecting African Americans. Now, all they were trying to do was get 4 more districts for Republicans. But the Voting Rights Act of 1965 says that you cannot discriminate against racial minorities when you are drawing your maps. And so Texas was sued by the League of United Latin American Citizens, better known as LULAC. Joining in the suit on different grounds was MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, all sued the state of Texas and said that the maps that you drew had an adverse effect on minorities, and you cannot do that. That's a violation of the Voting Rights Act. They fought and fought and fought and fought and fought and fought. Um, and that year, they pushed it was an election year. They pushed the primary back to June. It's usually in March. Finally, Texas just settled. And so they said, what we'll do is 2 of these districts, or 3 of these districts actually, we will make sure that there is high minority representation in those districts. That is called a majority minority district. Majority number minority group that has experienced discrimination. So this was one of them. District 33 was one of them. And so they went and handpicked areas that have large percentages of Hispanics and African Americans, like Everman, South Side, North Side, most parts of Irving, a lot of parts of Grand Prairie, West Dallas, Cockrell Hill, um, and so they went and chose areas that had high concentrations of minorities. Now, if you are fixing something, and so you are gerrymandering to fix a problem, especially a problem that adversely affected a minority population, that type of gerrymandering is acceptable. Now, the question of can you gerrymander to give your party an advantage is another one. And a couple of cases got to the United States Supreme Court, but then the Supreme Court said, you know what, this is for states to decide. So we're not going to answer the question. So whatever decision your state Supreme Court made, then that's the one that you're going to have to live with. We're going to this should be for states. It should not be for the Supreme Court because voting is state by state. I thought that was a punt, but they didn't intervene one way or the other and did not answer the question. So if your state decides that it is okay for you to gerrymander giving a particular party an advantage, as long as it's not discriminatory against minorities, then go for it, is what the Supreme Court said. I don't know if you can tell, that's one of my favorite subjects. I love talking about gerrymandering because I just find it very, very interesting. Um, the topic, because we went far, I went off into the weeds, but the topic that we're discussing is what things give incumbents an advantage. And basically, incumbents are able to talk to members of state legislatures and get them to draw districts that give them an advantage. Have a whole bunch of people that have voted for them before and are likely to vote for them again. So, gerrymandering, reapportionment, and redistricting give incumbents an advantage. Over the years, if we look at the percentages, members of the House of Representatives are actually slightly more likely than members of the Senate to get reelected. Um, and it just really, a lot of times it has to do with whether or not you had a big scandal and whether or not it's a presidential election year and how popular the presidential candidate from your party is. Costs a lot of money to run for office. It definitely costs more than um, they make in a year to run for office. And so you see the 2010 Senate, the cost was $15 million. It's getting expensive, and they're raising some serious money. And this chart just reinforces the fact that political action committees are much more likely to give money to incumbents. But I am not seeing what the source of that information is. So there are a lot of advantages to being an incumbent. There are also some problems that are associated with it. If you, if the person that is at the top of your party is unpopular, then a lot of that is going to rub off on you. If Congress is doing as a body unpopular things, then people are going to associate that with you. Because you have name recognition, when you flub up and do something you're not supposed to do. My congressman for years was a guy named Jerry Barton. Jerry Barton separated from his wife had a relationship with a lady and then broke up with her and went back to his wife. And the lady started publishing pictures of his man parts that he had sent her because she was mad. He decided that he just wasn't going to run for Congress again. Guy named Anthony Weiner from New York was sending his man parts on Twitter on private messages, and then he messed up one day and forgot to send it as a private message, so he actually tweeted out a picture of himself, and he liked the young ladies. So eventually, I think they were able to get him to quit. I don't think he ran for re-election, but boy, when you do something you're not supposed to do, it's going to get blasted all over the place. Um, and if it's not a presidential election year, turnout is going to be really low. We have a tendency to get really excited about the presidential candidate who we don't even vote for directly, um, and um, and we don't get as excited unless there's a an exciting candidate. We don't get as excited in midterm elections, and so sometimes it can really hurt because the people that are going to the polls are the people that are enthusiastic about your opponent. So there are some times. Um, in primary elections, because you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have what are called primaries, where they decide who the one candidate from their party is going to be. Uh, and so if you have a really strong challenger from your party, uh, then you can sometimes lose to that challenger in your primary election. And then so you don't get to be the candidate from your party to run. Um, and a lot of times the people that are deciding to run against a senator or a member of the House of Representatives has some kind of name recognition. For instance, in Arizona right now, there used to be a representative. Her name was Gabby Gifford. Gabby Gifford was a Democrat from Arizona, and she was married to this astronaut. He's a twin. I think both of them are astronauts. But he had flown some successful missions, so he was really popular, and Gabby Gifford was really popular. Somebody walked in. She was at an event, and someone walked into the event and just started shooting. And Gabby Gifford was injured, um, and had severe brain damage. She had to learn how to walk and talk again. So during her recovery, her husband, the astronaut, uh, was out front and center. He was speaking for her. He was reading statements that she had made. He was helping her through her recovery. He was very visible. And he is now running for Congress. So he has a lot of name recognition. He's associated with a beloved person, and he's running against a senator that is not super popular. She is not super popular. Her name is Martha McSally. And I'm sorry, guys. I love this stuff, so I'm just popping this stuff off. But that is just one example where if the challenger has a not a lot of name recognition or is a popular person, that makes it hard for that can make it hard for incumbents. And super PACs. So that is where several political action committees get together, pool their money, and run ads that candidates don't have to pay for. If they think someone is vulnerable, then they will donate money and run ads against the incumbent as well. And they have, plenty of record to show for it. Who has a tendency to win? Number one, there's not a whole bunch of restrictions. In the House of Representatives, you have to be at least 25 years old. You have to have served. You have to have been a citizen for at least 7 years. In the Senate, the minimum age is 30 years, and I believe that the citizenship requirement is bumped up to 9 years. Um, There are no other formal requirements, but if we look at the patterns, the people that tend to get chosen, a lot of representatives have law degrees. A lot of representatives are medical doctors, like Rand Paul from Kentucky, or businessmen. Um, there are some, but few working class members of Congress that are super, super excited about that $174,000 salary. Sometimes we call the Senate the Millionaires Club because there are so many people that are just super, super well off, like Mitt Romney from the senator from Utah, the junior senator from Utah. Um, Disproportionately, the members of Congress are white and male. That has been since the beginning of the United States. And but we did have in 2018 a record number of women um, to get elected, to run and actually win. And there was this at the beginning. Nancy Pelosi was able to convince all of the women, Democrats and Republicans, to wear white. So there's all these beautiful pictures of all the women, all in their white, bipartisan, and because that was the largest number of women that we've ever had. And so whatever and however you feel about our present Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, it still was an amazing moment because we just have never had that many women in Congress. Um, the states that have 30% or more of their representatives are women are represented in green. Um, the states in purple are 20 to 29%, and the states in, I guess, orange, chartreuse, I don't know, are less than 20%. All right, let's talk about party leadership. So we have what is called a bicameral legislature. And that simply means two chambers. Bi is two, like a bicycle has two wheels, bi, two chambers. And cameral means chamber. We have, in our Congress, we have the House of Representatives, which has 435 voting members, and the Senate, which has 100 members right now because we have two senators from every state. We have 50 states. So 535 members total in the House of Representatives. And this was certainly not by design. This was not the way that it was when it started. But today, we have major parties, and the parties count how many people they have. And the party that has the most is called the majority party. The parties select their leadership, and those are the people that make decisions for their party members, help decide what committees party members are going to be on, speak for the party's position on many things. And they get together and make decisions about how we're going to vote on this, and what we think about this, and what issues they think are most important, in something called caucuses. Now, there are all kinds of subject matter caucuses. There's a Tea Party caucus, there's Black caucus, there's Hispanic caucus. But there is also just these group of like-minded people, and those are the party caucuses. They get together and discuss strategy, issues, and resolving differences within the party. as they decide how they're going to work things out. So if we are looking at majorities, it really does change. It goes back and forth. After the 2018 elections, midterm elections, there was a majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives, and the Senate kept their majority in 2018. So right now, as we go into this election cycle, there's a Republican majority in the Senate and a Democratic majority in the House. So there is more than ever a lot of party unity within Congress. You don't see as much working together. You see a lot of, this is what Democrats say and this is what Republicans say, and Democrats aren't doing right and the Republicans just need to do this. As they have started tracking how people vote, people are much more likely today to vote with whatever the party has decided than they used to. So there is heightened unity, party unity in voting now. But that has certainly not always been the case. So just so that we can set it up, there are, we'll first talk about the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives has this party structure. They have the Speaker of the House, and if you remember back when I was showing you the salary, Speaker of the House makes about 12,000 more than the leaders and about 25,000 more than the members of the House, a little bit more than that actually. Speaker of the House is the most powerful person in Congress. There's no Speaker of the Senate. And so basically they have an election. After everybody gets elected, they have an election within the House of Representatives for who's going to be the Speaker of the House. So usually the Speaker of the House is a member of the majority party, because the majority party gets together and they all decide who they're going to vote for so that they can have control over who's going to be the Speaker of the House. And this person presides, speaks for Congress, talks to the president, although our Speaker of the House and our president haven't actually spoken to each other for over a year. But that is one of the roles that we normally see for a Speaker of the House. They are usually very visible, and they do a lot of negotiating. It's a very powerful position. Then each party has a leader. You have a majority leader, the majority party, and then you have a minority leader. And then each party has a whip. A whip. Now, what is a whip? A whip's job is to basically keep people in line. It's named for English whipper-in, which was a hunting dog, fox hunting dog, that was trained to keep the rest of the hunting dogs from getting distracted. So when they were on the hunt and dogs would get distracted by, I don't know, a rabbit, a squirrel, the whipper-in would start running circles around the dogs and would do these little barks, would be trained to do these barks, and like, nope, we're hunting foxes. And so he would get everybody, or she would get everybody redirected, and that's basically what the whip's job is to do. What's the problem? This is what the party is saying that they want to do. You're out there making speeches saying that you don't think you want to vote for that. What do you need? Do you need some money in your district? Do you need us to put something else in this bill? what do you need so that you can come along with the party and vote along party lines? And a lot of times it works, especially in modern times. A lot of times it works, but it is a tough job. So that's the House. In the Senate, um, remember I showed you that the vice president makes about $230,000. There is really not much in the Constitution about the vice president. The one duty that the Constitution definitely assigns to the vice president is that the vice president is the presiding officer, basically the president of the Senate. Now, even though our Constitution says that, our vice president does not do that. The vice president does not spend their days and nights in the Senate. They basically show up if there's ever a tie and break a tie. That's they're there on opening day, and then they break ties. But other than that, the vice president pretty much stays away. So the Constitution says that if the vice president doesn't serve or cannot serve, then there is a person that is called the president pro tem. And this is the longest serving, by tradition, it's the longest serving member of the majority party. So the party's most senior member. This, by definition, is usually an older person, and it is ceremonial. They do not preside. So we're down to, and we're just ignoring the Constitution. In the Senate, the person with the gavel, the person with the most power, the person that, as we are seeing, gets to sometimes even decide if bills even make it to the floor, is the majority leader. So the majority leader is the actual roll up your sleeves person on the in the Senate. Right now, the Republicans have a majority. The majority leader is a guy named Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell is from Kentucky. And Mitch McConnell has been running stuff. He's like, nope, we're not even talking about that bill. I know y'all did a whole bunch of work, but we're not talking about that bill today. So I think we will stop there. In our next lecture, we'll talk about committees and how a bill becomes a law and the other functions that that Congress has.